It's great to see everyone. It is the day after Valentine's Day, Wednesday, February 15th, and we are discussing Mandelbaum, the Criminal by Gerald Shapiro.
Yes.
I wanted to start with a little bit about Gerald Shapiro. You know, I always go and look, and I was like, oh, he's like my age. But then I went down another level. He died 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
He died when he was my age. So I just want to show you. And I was like, so sad because like he's a good looking, that's
Good
61.
looking.
He's young.
Yeah.
And
Guy.
this is the author.
Huh.
And there he is up there. But the other thing that I found out, and I'll put the link in the chat, is he was married to, and this is the story, Judith Slater. And they're in Nebraska, which is kind of like, not exactly the Jewish center of the universe. And she wrote this really beautiful piece. And I'm going to read a little bit of it, but I'll put it in the chat here. And if you click on it, you'll be able to read about it. You can go in and there's no paywall. But in the awful middle of the night hours, right after Jerry's death, when I couldn't concentrate on anything and was wondering how I was going to get through the night, much less the rest of my life, it occurred to me that the one thing I could do was reread Jerry's stories, and they comforted me so much. Talk about the power of stories. It was like hearing his voice. The opening passages of all Jerry's stories invite you in immediately to mysterious worlds filled with strange and funny and tragic characters. There were many geniuses at the Museum of the Mind, but Elliot Susskind wasn't one of them. These are all the beginning lines. And so it just goes on. He'd been hired by the University of Nebraska to teach fiction writing, which he did brilliantly. And he was really beloved in his classes. You know, of course, this is his wife writing it. I'm sure he was beloved, but I'm just saying. And she is also a writer. So I think it's just, she has short stories. His own stories were gifts to us. Though it would have been wonderful to have more of them. So, and I think he was sick. He might have, oh wait, I pulled up his obituary because I couldn't find, this was his obituary. He's known nationally. He was 61, a compiler of Jewish fiction. His books were, oops, I have to let Merlin. His books, including Bad Jews and Other Stories, that's from 1999, Little Men, 2004. He died in 2010. He grew up, he came to Nebraska in 1987 with his wife, Judith Slater. So they're both professors of English. He grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, in the only Jewish family in the neighborhood, receiving a traditional Jewish education and raised in an extremely traditional Jewish home. These experiences navigating the world surrounded by non-Jews informed his often comedic writing. So did his battle with Hodgkin's disease, diagnosed in his 20s. I can put the whole, this is his, that's the whole obituary, because I couldn't find anything in Wikipedia. And then when I saw he died in 2010, I'm like, I bet I could find his obituary. And I did. So on to the story, the criminal Mandelbaum. I'm going to read the first sentence because his wife had a proclivity for the first sentence of the story. Here we go. In a hospital. Oh, that's the other thing I kept thinking, that Kansas City, who just won the Super Bowl, right around Valentine's Day, yesterday, I was like, how did I couldn't have picked a better week for this. It gave, like the hairs go up on the back of your neck. In a hospital in Kansas City, Stan Wachtel's wife, Celia, was dying. That was the end. That's the first sentence. So you do want to go on from there. Okay. Did you like the story?
Loved it.
Loved it.
Yes.
Okay.
Loved it.
Okay. So I guess my first question is just, is Mandelbaum a criminal?
Yes.
Yes.
He is a forever, I wouldn't necessarily call him necessarily a criminal. He's probably what they call a white collar criminal, does little things and is what we would call like a mashugana or something. And he just cheats people. There's lots of people like that.
Yeah. Susan.
Well, he's a chief exploiter.
Yes.
And I tell you, I loved this book.
Too.
And I read it twice because I liked it so much, because I really felt it was so deep and there was so much to get out of it. And I thought that the way he described people and their physical appearances was just, I mean, it was comical. It was, I mean, he was very critical of the way people looked. And yet he was basically such a kind man. Stan, I'm talking about.
Stan, yeah.
He was so kind, and he let this cheeky brother-in-law exploit him. And what it was to me was a lesson to all of us as we grow old, as I have done, and that forgiveness should be in our nature. And no matter what this brother-in-law did to him, and the way he talked to him and the way he was taking advantage of him, and every little thing, having not a place to stay, having not any $10 anymore.
Even though he showed $20 to the maitre d'.
Right. All this stuff. And yet at the end, you could tell he was forgiving him. And what reminded me of his description of the Pope washing the feet in the kind of toward the beginning of the story. And how could the Pope do this? How could, this? And that was like forgiveness. And then at the end,
He's doing the same
does
thing.
the same thing.
Right.
Terry, then Sandy.
Well, you actually brought up the point that I really was thinking about. I felt that the book, it was almost like bookends. The Pope washing the feet in the beginning, and then Stan washing Cheeky's feet at the end, because the story, you weren't really sure where the story was going. And then in the end, when you had that scene, it almost brought it all full circle. And he couldn't understand in the beginning why the Pope would wash the feet of somebody so horrible. And then, of course, he was doing the very same thing. And it was almost like he understood. It's that gave him clarity at the very end. I thought it was a very, very interesting story.
Okay. Thank you. I have Sandy, Izzy, then Elaine. Sandy, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just came in on the meeting, so I missed the first 8-9 minutes. So maybe you've talked about this, but I just love the story. I just loved it. I laughed out loud continuously. It was like watching a play or a movie. You could see the characters right in front of you. It was just so beautifully written. It was like you were right there in the room with them. And of course, it wasn't just the Pope. I think didn't Jesus wash somebody's feet? I'm not up on my Christian religion, but it really was a fantastic story. I would love to, I saw the movie already last night when I read it, but I'd love to see them make a movie of this.
Be interesting, yeah. Izzy.
No, I agree with what everybody said. I thought the idea of him washing And also, he was saying the Pope could barely get down on his knees, and Stan was struggling to get down on his knees, and here he was making fun of him. And I think it was how Stan evolved. Rachmanis is the good word for this, I think, because he felt this guy was such in need. He took a $20 bill out of his pocket, but I think that's probably all the money he had in the world. He really had no place to stay. He really had no money. He was really hungry. And this Stanley was so kind at the beginning. He hated him because of his wife, but it was a journey that he took to finally have him in the end. And I think it was somewhat comforting for him to actually have him sleep in the house when he was all alone. And this guy comes back to the house. He's doing such a good thing. And I also thought some of the parts were absolutely hysterical. And there's also a connection between their son, who was this brilliant, brilliant, brilliant guy who got lost. He got lost exploring the varieties of laughter among a remote, previously undocumented tribe. He got lost there. And so did Cheeky. Cheeky was the most brilliant in the family. And he got lost too, in a kind of metaphor way. But I thought it was just beautiful, beautiful story. But then I wrote this down when Cheeky came into the room, from across the room, he could smell the man's cologne. Well, if this man is so homeless or whatever, where'd he get the cologne? And I did think I didn't think he was a white collar crime person. I think he was a mafia kind of guy, a long time ago, and they just never made it. Just his brilliance just kind of faded, and it was very sad. But the thing is, I don't understand at the delicatessen why his wife kept saying, "Go say hello, go say hello, go say hello," but she wouldn't. And then she wouldn't ask him for a long time after what he said. So I didn't understand that, why she made him go say hello to his
Right. Family relations are complicated. All right. I have Elaine, Alice, and Meryl.
Okay.
Elaine.
Number one, I think that they both needed each other. Yes, Stan forgave him, but Stan also needed someone in his lonely house. And the wife, I think, wanted the brother to be part of her back in her life, but was hesitant for the relationship. And as you know, it's difficult when you see someone out of the blue that has been important in your life, to go up to them. And so it's easier to say, you go, your husband or your kid, and sort of make the first initiative. But I think that in the long run, they both benefited. I think that the brother why was he crying so much? I think if you go to a funeral, when people have been not attentive to the person who died, they're the ones, in my observation, that are crying the most. The person that takes care of the person that dies is sort of content in what they've done, and they did the best they could. But the one that ignores the person that dies is the one that's sobbing in the corner because of their deeds. And I think that showed that he felt bad. And older people, as we all know, have a difficult time saying we're sorry for whatever we do. It's difficult. And I think the fact that the house was so lonely and so alone, and the son had died, I think that they both mutually benefited from Izzy's forgiveness.
I think that's very insightful, Elaine. Because sometimes I think about that. I'm like, why is that person sobbing? I haven't seen them for 10 years.
Yeah.
But that's why. Alice.
Yeah, at this point, I'm probably not going to say anything original. I really agree with everybody. And I think, to put everything that everybody said together, I think the story is about forgiveness and loneliness. And I mean, I know you were, Vanessa, you were talking about the beginning of the story, and I know we always, look at the end. And I mean, I think the end was like so heartbreaking. He, Stan said he meant the question, for the love of Mike, will you shut up, to come out gruffly, but really it came out soft and bone weary. I mean, he's just a man who really needs somebody to love. He lost his son, now he lost his wife. And yeah, I guess Cheeky's the one, he's part of the family, even though he really wasn't part of the family for very long. That's all that Stan has left. And I guess he's gonna hold on to that. And well, not only did he lose these people, he lost his business, and this is,
we have to talk about the businesses. And we have Merle, Evelyn, and then Beverly. But he went into Super 8 and VHS comes out. And then as soon as he bought the developing store, I'm like, oh my God, isn't it digital camera time? And just, hindsight is 2020, but that he put all his money into that and, was really, and the other thing is, and I'm going to put it here, there's a schlemiel is somebody who spills the soup, and a schlemazel is the person who lands on it. So I don't know which one these are, but I think it's schlemiel and schlemazel, the two of them. Okay, I got to go back. Oh, wait, I had to put this here. And Merle.
Okay, so I thought it was really a story of human connection. It reminded me a little bit of the story where the girl's father died and then the stranger comes into the house who really helps her out. They kind of, God sends an angel, a kind of messenger that's unexpected, because God's angels take many different forms. And I thought there was a lot of sprinkling of Yiddish words, which made it kind of funny. But there was one Yiddish word that I didn't understand, and I wanted to ask. It was spelled Joskie, and he used it to describe Greenstein, the man who had sold him the business that was destined to fail. And he called him a J-O. I didn't know if that was a Yoshki. I understand Yoshki, but I don't understand.
Yeah, I had to look that up too. And I don't know that I got anything. I couldn't find anything.
I looked it up also, and
I
couldn't
also
find
did.
anything. I
And
couldn't find
nothing came up that made
Mm.
sense.
Okay, so anyway, my husband said maybe it's Yoshki, and in which case it would be, Jesus bringing you the answer to everything, and then that business
Yes.
failed. Could be that. Okay, it was just
Yeah.
the spelling. Also,
You're right. Yeah, that's probably what it was.
yeah, and I think the main connection, couple of main connections too, I thought was the loss of the son, which was terrible. And then this man, as he said, they were both supposed to be brilliant, and then their lives go in this bad direction. And the other thing was the class consciousness, that they went to the fancy restaurant. And honestly, could they have even gotten a decent reservation at that place if they had seen them in person? They didn't belong there. They were of the same social class. And when they finally went out for hamburgers, it seemed like they bonded over dinner, because that's where they belonged. So I think there was a commonality. And I think that the wife had given him this impression about her brother that was maybe wrong. That, it was also negative. And how do you prejudge a person before you even meet them? And when
Yeah.
he met the brother, it turned out there was a commonality and real human connection. And I love the ending. Yeah.
Okay. Evie, wait, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead. And then Beverly, and then Alice.
I love the fact that that the author was able to pick up on some of the changes in emotion when you're dealing with illness, and the parts of you that you don't really like come out, and the parts that you don't recognize. And I remember, many years ago when my mother was, dying, and the nurse said, Ray, you're such a nice person. And she said, I used to be. And I think about that all the time, that both the person that is dying and the caregivers, their personalities change, how they see things differently. But interestingly, I read this late last night, after I watched a Zoom video of somebody that I really adore, who's a Torah teacher on Zoom, and she was talking to a group of young women who are Sephardic young women that are very religious. And she was talking about the Torah portion, Mishpatim, which is coming up. And she was talking about seeing things with eyes of grace. And in terms of being non-judgmental, in terms of how somebody reacts to somebody, how they observe, and just almost being detached and realizing they're coming from a different place, and to suspend the judgment. So that helped me, because at first when I started to read this last night, it was too upsetting for me, and I didn't know that I was up to continuing. But I'm so glad that I did, and then finished it this morning. But I just love the story.
Yeah, good. I have Beverly, Alice, and then Merle.
Well, I want to say that I love the story, and I felt like I understood it, like I was in it, but I don't know anybody like that. So that was kind of interesting to me, that I felt so akin to it. But I think what I felt akin to most was the emotion on how he felt about losing his wife, and one more day of her not dying would have been wonderful. And I felt the word travelogue is the wrong word, but it was like a travelogue of his life, remembering how she was when he first met her, in this talking over and over about the silk dress that she wore, but was probably not silk because it was the war and they didn't really use silk. And then it's a story full of losses, the son, the business, on and on. And
Businesses.
And as I age, I think that's one of the things I related to so strongly in the story, is that my life, and a lot of people's lives are really full of losses. And so I found the story very poignant for me, and I loved it. I just thought it was the best story so far.
Oh, thank you.
Really enjoyed, and the fact that it did hit Valentine's Day. I wondered if you knew that ahead of time. This is unbelievable.
Super unbelievable. Sometimes, like if there's a Purim one, I'll try to, take it out and do it then, but this was happenstance. Alice.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is, at the beginning, we talked about the washing of the feet, the Pope, and then how Stan washes Cheeky's feet. And then for me, there was, from people talking, I just thought of this other parallel. The son walks out of their lives. I mean, they don't know what happened to him. Remember, he walks away from the group and then they never find him. And then Cheeky walks into their lives. Because really, even though he was the brother of, is it Seal or Cecilia? Whatever. They haven't seen him in umpteen years. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. And then this goes to what Beverly was just saying. You know how things come together, like Evie, you were saying about, the Zoom you were watching. Well, I was watching CBS Mornings and they had on this author. It was the Oprah book. So I can tell you if you didn't see it, it's called Bittersweet by Susan Cain. And she also wrote the book Quiet. Some of you might have heard of it. Anyways, she was talking about how older people have a better perspective on life because you've lived more of it, and also you see the end is closer. And so then you have actually a better appreciation for things than younger people. And you can be maybe more in the present, more in the moment, because you realize all these moments are very precious. So I thought, that completely went with how Stan was thinking about his wife. He just wanted one more day. Yeah.
Yeah, I just looked it up and it's bittersweet how sorrow and longing make us whole. So
Yeah.
kind of interesting that that's what you know,
Yeah,
that
that's
kind
all-
of sums up our story.
Exactly, exactly.
I have Merle and then Sandy.
Mhm. I was very impressed by the hospital scene where they're the very lovely, kind nurses, and the doctors just say, que sera, sera. They really don't know, and how little control any of us have over what's going to happen. And he said he had no respect for the technology they used, all the modern machines they used. And he said, this line I thought was funny. He said, these things, all these modern machines, there's the promise of ease, of recovery, of everlasting life, and it was all worth nothing. These quacks might as well have put leeches on her back, sacrificed a cat at the foot of her bed. I mean, that really, it sums up so much that you put all your trust in the doctors and the new technology, and sometimes it just doesn't help. Like, we really have no control over these things that happen.
Yeah. Sandy, I'm gonna, there you go. Go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, it's just a small thing, but maybe someone said this before. I'm in the doctor's office waiting room now, but did anyone think that the brother-in-law was ever going to go away? He wasn't there for one night. He was never going to leave.
No, he was there to stay.
Yeah, he was there to stay.
Yeah.
Again, I
absolutely.
love the story. It was the greatest story.
Susan.
Well, I love what Beverly said, because I too could really identify with Stan when he was going through all his memories of his wife and how they first met and how because as somebody who, I lost my husband just a little over 2 years ago, and I find myself thinking about all the good times, and I could really identify with, in fact, when he was doing that in the book, I was crying reading it because it brought to me exactly what I do. And it's so real in what happens when we lose somebody we love.
Yeah.
And as time goes on, your love changes too. It's not the same as it was in the beginning, that, you know, immediate passion that one feels. It does change. It doesn't mean you don't still love that person.
Mhm.
And it was just, it was so real to me.
Yeah, I wonder how his widow felt reading it after he died.
Mm.
I mean, after, for people who came in late, and I put it back into the chat, but he died at 61, 10, 12 years ago. And it's just, it was sad, very sad. He lives in Nebraska. Terry and then Alice.
Picking up on what Susan was saying, there's a passage on page 235 where he repeats the fact that the dress probably weighed only 2 ounces, which I thought was interesting that the author repeated that a second time. But he starts out by saying he allowed himself the momentary luxury of considering the imponderables. He thought of Celia in her dress, the tip-top tap room, that dress blue, something silky so many years ago. It could have weighed 2 ounces so long ago when everything seemed possible. What could it have meant all their years together? What could it have possibly signified if they'd known it would all come down to this? Would they have fallen in love? Would they have bothered to dance at all? And I feel like he was being so philosophical and just trying to figure out, was this all worth it? Because the pain was so deep that it almost made him feel like, was it worth it? So I thought that was really a poignant passage.
This was first published in the spring of 2008, which is like 3 years before he died. So he had Hodgkin's disease, and, you know, he probably knew what was in his future. Well, whatever, probably knew something. Merle, and then Alice.
all of these people that we rely on, we already said the doctors don't know anything, but he was also relying on the rabbi who came in to comfort her. But sadly, the rabbi at age 82, which doesn't sound very old at all, it was starting to get dementia. He couldn't even remember Celia's name. And so it just seems like he has this very fatalistic view of life, that things just deteriorate. The people you count on, old age does this to people. And it's sad. It's really sad until the brother comes, the brother-in-law. The brother-in-law really, really brings some joy in a very strange way and at a strange time. But it's good that the brother-in-law came.
Alice and then Elaine.
Yeah. Vanessa, you asked the question what his widow would have thought about the story.
Yeah.
I think that goes along with that bittersweet. I think it would have been in a way comforting, showing really how much he loved her, because he painted this beautiful picture of how much Stan loves Celia. So I think in that way it would have been comforting. Probably hard to read because it's about somebody, but yeah, again, that bittersweet. And then one more thing, this goes along with what Merle said earlier. I know we've all gone through the loss of family. And when I read that part of the hospital of, Celia dying when he wasn't there, well, my mom was in the hospital. It's interesting. She probably shouldn't have been in the hospital, but nobody knew what to do. She was 99 and just things were kind of falling apart. But really, did the doctors do anything? Not really. They probably should have sent her home, but whatever, none of us knew what to do. And she passed away, I think it was early morning. I got there every day and my mom was gone when I got there. And it was really upsetting, obviously upsetting because she was gone, and upsetting because I walked in and nobody, in that hospital knew or told me that she had passed away. So that was, oh my God, when I think about it, it still upsets me. But that kind of goes along with, you hope that the hospital can do something, the doctors can do something, but in many cases, it's, a false hope, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, I have Izzy. Yes. Izzy, then Evie, then Terry, then Sandy. Izzy, go.
All of a sudden it hit me. I had an aunt that I had never met because my father talked so horribly about her. Same kinds of things. She's this, she's that, she's everything. Well, she came in for my father's funeral and I met her the first time at my father's funeral. And we bonded immediately. It was like, the way she acted and the way she was totally antithesis to what my father said. And so I embraced her. And it was the same. I met her. This was my aunt I met at my father's funeral. And I'd only heard bad things about her for years and years. So, you make your own judgments. Maybe which was good that he did.
Was she crying uncontrollably?
No.
Sorry. Anyway,
He wasn't.
okay. Evie, Terry, Sandy, and then Elaine.
I love the conversation about food.
Oh, yeah.
Just the descriptions, and then afterwards going to a restaurant where everything that would be trafe was discussed, and then settling down for a down-home hamburger. I mean, the contrast of that, and we get the royal we. I get so much comfort out of food, and food means so much to me, and it's something that is always, because I've always had a challenge with this whole kashrut thing from my day school days, which is, it's always when I'm having an issue about something that kind of goes back to that, and I have not resolved it, so I'm all over the place on it. So I kind of related to just the shrimp and the lobster and this, and then the hamburger, and but they put cheese on it. But then there was always a Danish that they were splitting. I mean, something the idea of food, I mean, humorous, enjoyable, and I just kind of loved it. it was just kind of a funny thing in there to me.
Why'd they split the Danish? Forgot to ask.
It did make me hungry. All right, Sandy probably was called to the doctor, so that gives us Elaine. Oh, wait, Terry, then Elaine.
Well, I loved your food references. And mine is not as light and gay, but what occurred to me when you were discussing the hospital scene is that when my father was ill for probably 10 months, he had left the hospital and he was in a facility because he was on a ventilator. And my mother and I went every single day to visit him. And one day I said to her, Mom, you're exhausted. Why don't you take the day off, stay home, do a few things, relax. That was the day he died. And I have heard this from my daughter-in-law, who is a doctor, that this is not unusual.
Right.
That somehow, even though you think the patient is not aware, I mean, the same thing with my mother. My sister debated whether she should come in from Minnesota because she felt she had already said goodbye. And then finally she said, no, I'm coming. And my mother died the day that she came. It was like she waited for her. And so it's almost, surreal when you think about it, but there is something that I think studies would show that this is not unusual. One other example is my friend's mother was very sick, and her mother kept saying, go on vacation, go and enjoy yourself. So my friend and her husband went on a cruise, or they started to, and the minute she got onto the ship, she got a call that her mother had passed away. It's almost like you have to just leave so that I can do my thing. So that's what kind of hit me as you were talking.
Yeah. It's I don't know if you can medically prove it, but definitely anecdotally. Elaine and then Susan.
Okay, Terry took what I was going to say. When my mother was ill, the nurse came in and said, the people die when you leave, and they die, unfortunately, alone. But I think one of the reasons why we love the story is we all can read ourselves in pieces of it, and we redo our lives. And the loved one, I agree with Susan, life has changed for all of us, and we have lost people. It's hard to gain people in your late 70s or 80s. And you don't gain new friends. They're not like your old friends or your spouses or your children. And I think that this story, we all picked up on what is relevant to the individual. And I think that's why we love the story so much.
Agreed.
It's true, we do need human contact, no matter what, and we search it out continuously. They say that when you get older, you need human contact. That's what keeps people alive longer, friendships and stuff.
Right.
And that's what I think the brother and brother-in-law probably realized they needed each other. And I'm sure they would live their lives out.
Right. I'm sure Cheeky knew he needed Stan. It was Stan coming around
Right.
that he needed Cheeky.
Right. But they both, when he gave Cheeky the bedroom, he realized that he was going to stay there, not just one night.
Yeah. Susan.
Well, Terry, Elaine, you all said exactly what I was going to say, because when my father was ill and at Evanston Hospital, and my mother and I went every day, my brothers and I took turns being with my mother every single day we were there. My mother and I were there. We got there in the morning and we were sitting there. And then finally I said to her, Mom, you need to eat. You need to have something to eat. Let's go get some lunch. And sure enough, we came back and he had died. And the nurse said to us, he waited for you to leave because he didn't want you to see him die.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it happens all the
All
time.
the time, yeah. I'm sure, if either rabbi were here, any of our clergy, they would say the same thing. And, they do a lot of hospital visiting and hospice visiting and, anecdotally, it's absolutely. Merle, yeah, go ahead.
Well, back to the hospital, you are going through the most emotional time. You see your loved one very sick and dying. And all of these doctors are so cool and dispassionate. And he remarked that one of the doctors wore an inappropriately festive floral bow tie. And that doctor says to him, I'm sorry, she's just old, her heart's tired. And he's thinking, this isn't news to me. She's 85 and we've had a hard time. I didn't realize that they were in their mid 80s already because the brother-in-law, Sachiki, said that he was 90.
90.
So, I mean, they were all pretty old. They were pretty old. So, except it doesn't seem old when you're that age yourself. You don't think of yourself as old. I mean, you think of like
Yes, you do.
77 as the teenager or something. You don't feel like you're old. But it's just, that's the way it is in the hospital. Everybody else is having fun and joking and talking and wearing floral print ties, and you don't understand it because you're suffering. I thought that was all very realistic.
Yeah. So did it say what Cheeky's real name was?
You know,
No.
the
I
mother,
don't think.
the
So,
mother, when the mother was dying, they
Mother,
said the
right.
mother was dying, and when she got the news about
Right.
Chicky being in, and
Oh,
she
yes.
said, "Oh, Herschela,"
Ursula.
That's
and
right.
I wondered if that was his real name. Was
Right.
Herschel?
So
Yeah.
I looked up Cheeky, and I think maybe the author, cheeky means disrespectful in speech or behavior, impudent, offensively bold. So I think he personified his name. He was cheeky, and so that's one thing. You can comment on that, but what do you think that both he and Arnold, Arnie, that missing kid, were the bright one in the family and all their hopes were, on these two. And basically they both kind of disappeared from the family, Susan.
Yeah, but there was something about Arnie and drinking too much alcohol
Oh,
and
smoking.
and smoking and getting kind of himself into trouble with that stuff.
yeah, but so did Cheeky. I mean, he was not living the life of, I don't know. I guess they had different vices. They had different, Elaine.
We all have family members that we don't agree with and we fight with. And as we get older, we begin to see that maybe the mistakes they made when they were younger have to be forgiven because we need those people. And people are flawed. That was the whole story of the book. I mean, people are not perfect. And I think when you realize that, it's just easier to love everyone when you realize that I'm not perfect and you're not perfect.
Yeah. Terry.
Well, when you say that, when you study Torah and you learn about the characters and we see how flawed they are, I think that this kind of reminds me of that. It's like, these are our ancestors, but they certainly were not perfect. When Susan brought up the part about Arnie, I thought that was very strange. It was like he was the golden child. He did everything, at the top of his class. He went to the best schools. He ended up, being so celebrated. And then to kind of throw in this piece about how he was drinking, he was smoking, but what could you say? It was kind of like you couldn't really comment because he was so perfect and he was their source of joy. He actually, for the two of them, he was their nachas. He was just the best thing in their life.
Mhm.
And the fact that he died, or who knows if he died, something happened to him.
Right. That was, it was so,
incredible.
so open-ended, you know, and in today's world where you can, you know, see where they last cashed a check or use their debit card, or, you know, your digital footprint now is much easier to track. So it's like, how could he just fall off the earth?
But not in the jungle.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Even in Nairobi, they have, you know, ATMs. Alice.
No, I was gonna say kind of what somebody else just threw out. I mean, he wasn't even in Nairobi. I mean, he was in the middle of nowhere. Wasn't he like more like in the Amazon or something?
There somewhere.
They said, you know, he just walked away from his group. I don't think it was the kind of thing that he could be found. But again, I think it's that parallel between him. He was the golden child, so was Cheeky. And then Ernie walks out of their lives and Cheeky walks into their lives.
Interesting, yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I think that's maybe why we all love the story so much. In 20 pages, this author got in so much emotion, so much symbolically, so much like talking about their past lives. And I just think in 20 pages, he did an amazing job. It was almost like reading a novel.
I mean, I felt like I knew the people. I don't always feel that. Arnie was the least developed character.
Right.
And so, now, Joyce, did you have your hand up?
Kind of.
Okay.
No, I think perhaps Arnie, with his vices, couldn't handle his fame and therefore went to the drinking and the drugs because so much was expected of him. And when he was in the jungle and he walked away from the group, those words, walked away, I think that's exactly what he did. He walked away because he couldn't handle things.
Wow. Yeah, you're probably right. Merle.
Well, that's what Celia did too. She walked away from the rest of her family. And the word that they used to describe, the word that the author used to describe her family was fractious, Fractious. And I was thinking about how, yes, in every family, there are people who are irritable and argumentative, and you would walk away from every family. There's always going to be somebody like that. So I think Celia was flawed too by rejecting her whole family. And I walked away from this story thinking about the word fractious, because most of the vocabulary in this story was rather simple and accessible, but that's a word that a lot of people probably had to look up. And yet that describes so many people's families. And do you walk away from them? So I thought Celia was flawed too.
I just have to share this anecdote. I had a colleague who did an article, and she's a rabbi, but not a pulpit rabbi. She works in an institution, and she said, this is why you should belong to a synagogue. This is before COVID. This was 4 or 5 years ago. She said, you know, I look at the synagogue as my family. Do you like everyone in your family? No, but you have to get along with them. You know, do you fight with this one? Yeah. But they're there for you when you're down. And I think about that article all the time, how when you join a synagogue, it's like your family. They're there for you. And there are certain people who you want to walk away from and, you know, who get on your nerves or whatever. Not that I have any of those people. Or whatever we say in here does not go out to anyone else. So I think that, and look, I'm sure we could all tell anecdotes about families where people have walked away and they just said, you know, goodbye. And I always find that very, very sad. That it's not always comfortable, but that's, you know, that's what your family is. You have to reach out and do that type of thing. Evie.
Yeah, just to add to that, sometimes you don't even remember what the issue is, and it's so trivial in retrospect, but the feelings linger on, and that's what's so sad. You can't pinpoint it, and it's very disruptive.
Agreed. Let's see, what else did I have pointed out? I think that I also thought he did a good job of describing everything. The highbrow, restaurant, it was kind of like a supper club. And, why he thought he could go there and,
He knew the pastry chef.
Oh, right. That's what it was. You're right. Who of course
Ricardo.
was not there at night. Right. So,
And he wanted to impress his brother-in-law that he was still a big
Right.
shot.
So-
Sometimes we lose so much, we cling to something to show what our former lives were.
right.
And I think Chicky once said, in one of the pages, that he was an important man and he's just gone downhill now.
Right.
And I think he wanted to impress Stan.
Right. And the thing is, said Cheeky, this is on 233. My brother-in-law here just lost his wife, my sister, Celia. She died today. There was an audible catch in his voice. Valentine's Day, if you can believe that. They've been married 60 years, longer. He's a wreck. He's a distraught. And the maitre d' said, I'm terribly sorry. And then, Cheeky goes on and said, I know there's a table back there. And of course, at a lot of these places, there are, they keep a table, something for whatever your high rollers. I mean, today in a post-COVID world, who knows what the restaurants look like? They're smaller, they're harder to get into. But that little vignette is very poignant. Susan.
So we've talked about almost everything in this book, and everybody's had wonderful things and wonderful comments. The one thing we didn't talk about is the author's fat shaming, to use a current term.
Oh,
You noticed that how he described the nurses in the doctor's offices and in the hospital, and
yes.
how many of us have gone to a hospital or gone to a doctor's office and looked at the sizes of these nurses and said to ourselves, oh my God, this is in a health place?
Yeah. Or the doctor.
Or the doctor himself, right?
Well,
And
everybody
I
brings
think-
cookies to the nurses and the doctors.
And I don't know, that really, hit me that he talked about that in this book.
I do think, this was written, let's say, it was published in 2008. Today, the eyes of 2023 are much more sensitive, critical. We realize, what people are dealing with, and, maybe that's, where he was coming from.
How about the sizes of the chairs in a waiting room?
Oh, right.
But we wouldn't write that today.
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. It would be shunned. It would be, oh no, you don't talk about it. It's still there. The nurses are still chubby, but everybody brings them treats to thank them for their care.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
My mother has a cardiac doctor. We went in to see him and we laughed. I go, Mom, I think he's lost weight. And she goes, because he was chubby and he's a cardiac doctor. Like those guys that's all they do is, put in a stent and whatever. And she didn't notice it or whatever, but it was just kind of, I noticed it. And I'm sure those nurses and doctors are under pressure to, live a cleaner life. And they talk about, on page 237, they talk about, I've got plenty. Yeah, for yourself, you got plenty. 90 years old. I saw you put away that burger. The way they describe them eating those burgers, and that it's a diner. It's full of fat. It's full of everything. So why'd you eat it? Who put a gun to your head? anyway, as we come up on the hour here, I think that it was just really a beautiful story, and made more poignant because we know a little bit about the author. I'm always, and maybe this is my thing, taken with the author's story or what's happened to them, because I think it affects it just affects how they write and the story. And even like the Epsom salts, he puts Epsom salts, and I was thinking about his feet and like, oh my God. I mean, that is really that's a mitzvah. What he was doing with Cheeky is a mitzvah, helping the sick, helping him, giving a place to, excuse me, eat, live. And so I thought it was a beautiful ending. It was a good story. Alice.
Yeah, I just want going on what you said, Vanessa. At one point he asks, was everything when we were young, we were thinking, was it all worth it? And what you just said, it was worth it. He grew into a man that could be such a mensch and, do a mitzvah like that towards the end, probably towards the end of Cheeky's life. So it was worth it for him.
Absolutely. So in 2 weeks, which will be March 1st, we're going to read The Two Franzes by Melvin Jules Bouquiet, who's 70, which I'm, that's young. So another MFA writing program, Sarah Lawrence. So, we'll see what he has to add. Lots going on at Macomb. This weekend, we're in person for adult enrichment. It's a Choosing Judaism panel. And of course, Lox and Bagels. So I hope you all come on down. It's just from 10 to 11. It'll be a lot of fun. We have some interesting speakers. And if you ever need anything, you know where to get me.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye-bye.